This is Kristin Beltzer, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Connect with KB. My guest today is a senior editor for Crain's Detroit Business, and he was recently recognized as one of the most influential political voices in Michigan. I want to welcome to the podcast Chad Livengood. Chad, thanks so much for joining me. It is a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, Kristin. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about the Chad Livengood story. Tell the listeners, who is this guy?
Well, I'm a reporter. I guess I'm kind of a veteran reporter now. I've been a full-time journalist for 15 years. I started my career at the Jackson Citizen-Patriot as an education reporter. And I went to school for journalism at Central Michigan University, was the editor of Central Michigan Life, the student newspaper. And when I came out of school, I wanted to be a political reporter. And I took this job in Jackson because it was the only job I could find at the time, really, without leaving the state. And I thought it was going to be really boring being an education writer, but I found out there's a lot of politics in local school districts. And so I learned a lot about the sort of intricacies of local government in Jackson, covering the school systems there and the community college. And then in early 2008, as the economy was going south in Michigan, or already really was, but nationally was starting to sour, I was looking around for some type of opportunity to get to a state capital. And there wasn't very much of a path to Lansing at the time for me from a career standpoint. So I left the state and became a political reporter in Springfield, Missouri, as their state house correspondent, roving reporter in Southwest Missouri. I'm actually originally from Missouri, and even though a lot of people know that I am tried and true to claiming to be a Michiganian, I was born in Missouri, and I am a product of the Show Me State. And I moved away as a kid and moved to Michigan when I was really young. But all my family is from Missouri, and so some of my wife's family was from Springfield. So we just kind of decided to up and move. We were young, in our mid-20s, and I became the state house reporter for the state's third largest newspaper, and covered the presidential election that year, and then covered the legislature or General Assembly in Missouri for about 3 sessions. And then in 2010, I took a promotion within the Gannett Company and went to Wilmington, Delaware, to become a state house reporter, political reporter there. And if anybody follows national politics real closely, I parachuted into Delaware, the best time ever in state politics there. It was the year that Kristin O'Donnell, this Tea Party upstart, upset the longtime Republican Congressman Mike Castle in a primary for the U.S. Senate race for what was Joe Biden's seat. That had been vacant since he became vice president 2 years earlier. And so, it had been temporarily filled, but with Ted Kaufman, his longtime chief of staff. But the seat was open, and it was really basically Mike Castle's to lose. And Mike Castle lost it, and the Democrats recruited the Newcastle County executive, Chris Coons, to basically sort of take one for the team that year against Castle and let Castle serve in the Senate for 4 years, essentially, because Beau Biden, the son of Joe Biden, the Attorney General of Delaware at the time, was not quite ready to follow Dad straight into the U.S. Senate seat that he had held for 36 years. And so they recruited Coons to run for this, thinking he was going to lose to Mike Castle, and lo and behold, Chris Coons ended up beating this Tea Party candidate, Kristin O'Donnell, who famously had to run a television ad saying that she's not a witch, which was quite a spectacle in American politics, because she had been on a TV show in the 90s where she actually talked about doing dabbling in witchcraft, and so it was one of the most strangest, unusual political campaigns I've ever covered. And so, long story short, 2012 came around, and there was a job opening at the Detroit News in the Lansing Bureau. Sort of a dream job to get back to Michigan, and so I came back to Michigan, and I've been here ever since, and settled and raising a family now. And then in 2017, I made a big switch in journalism and moved over to Crain's Detroit Business, being their public policy political reporter, and also writing with a more in-depth precision about the city of Detroit and its revitalization, which was kind of a beat I kind of created here post-bankruptcy. When I was during Detroit's bankruptcy in 2013, 2014, I covered it for the Detroit News, and coming out of that, I really wanted to have a part and play a role in telling the story of Detroit and its revitalization.
Well, let's talk about that. The city of Detroit, your role, as you just said, in sharing what's working and maybe some of the lingering challenges that still exist. Detroit's come a long way. Yeah.
So one connection to the fine folks at Spotlight Media is I launched a podcast through Spotlight back in 2017 called Detroit Rising. That's really kind of focused on interviewing the people, the businesses, the entrepreneurs, the various business leaders who have a hand in trying to change the narrative and change the direction of the city, and so that's been going on for 3 years, which is sort of surprising, but it's still out there. People can listen to it on iTunes, but the focus has changed a lot this year because of the pandemic. We were in a construction boom not seen in Detroit since the 1920s, before the stock market crash, with the revitalization, Ford Motor Company's revitalization of the Michigan Central Station, train station, Dan Gilbert's $2 billion of investment in building both a new skyscraper, a couple other office buildings, and revitalizing the Book Tower and a few other buildings in downtown Detroit. And then Fiat Chrysler Automobiles spending well over in excess of $2 billion to convert 2 engine plants into Detroit's first new assembly plant in a generation, since Chrysler opened the Jefferson North plant in 1991, which they are also going to retool and modernize. So a tremendous amount of investment going on in the city. Dan Gilbert and the billionaire from New York, Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, a Detroit native of the Fisher family, they are planning to build a satellite campus, essentially, for the University of Michigan, right at the site of the former Wayne County Jail that was only got half built, as people might remember, known as the failed jail. So there was a lot going on pre-pandemic, and the people were moving back into downtown, but at the same time, there was still a lot of problems going on in neighborhoods, still abandonment in the neighborhood, still problems with foreclosures, people having their water turned off. And so what I've been doing is tracking sort of the progress that has really been kind of mostly centered in what's known as the 7.2, which is 7.2 square miles of greater downtown. Includes Corktown, Lafayette Park, Midtown, and the Central Business District downtown, trying to track what is working, what is not in both revitalizing neighborhoods and also revitalizing the city's schools, which are seen as really the linchpin to getting people to move back into the city and grow families and raise families here.
Well, and the Detroit Financial Review Commission just released Detroit Public Schools, I think, from active oversight just this last week. What does that mean for them? And you just highlighted the fact that, education in the public school system is so important to Detroit. What do you think is going to change now?
Well, coming out of the bankruptcy of Detroit, the municipal bankruptcy in 2014, I, as a reporter from Lansing, started writing about the finances of Detroit public schools more in depth in 2015 and 2016 until the legislature bailed out the school district over $600 million to relieve the district of all this debt that had been piled up mostly by state emergency managers So just it's to me if I was nothing really in 2020 has been on anyone's bingo card, but I did not expect 4 years ago that this school district would emerge from financial oversight so fast, and it speaks to some better management for certainly of the school district. It also speaks to maybe why local control really does matter. And when you empower people to have control of their own destiny in their own school district, they do step up to the plate. That said, the school district has been improving its academic performance, its academic offerings, and really trying to remain competitive in a very competitive education market. And that's really been kind of key to their success and their stability. And now they got over $100 million surplus, which is just a far cry from they were just kicking pension payments down the road and not paying bills back in the spring of 2016.
What do you think it is about, or what do people need to know about Detroit? What do they don't know?
Well, what they don't know is the struggles that real people actually have in the city every day. There's too many people that just kind of drive into the city for work and do not spend a lot of time here and do not get outside of downtown. There was when I came to Crain's in 2017, driving around the city, there was a couple of stories that I did that are really memorable, and some of it just was things that just kind of drove me nuts. I'll back up. During the bankruptcy of Detroit, the Detroit News and Free Press used to be in the old Detroit News building, on Lafayette, at Lafayette and Second, right off the Lodge Freeway. And right there at the light at Lafayette and Second, there was this, maybe it's Third. Sorry, it's Third Street. There was a stoplight, and during the middle of Detroit's bankruptcy eligibility trial, where they're basically trying to prove to a judge, literally 2 blocks away on Lafayette Street at the federal courthouse, they're trying to prove to the judge that they are eligible for bankruptcy, and they're bringing in all these experts to talk about how broken the city systems are. And for the entire week, the traffic light at that corner, 2 blocks from the federal courthouse, was out. And finally, I said something to an editor about it, and I kept seeing it every day I came in, and I said, we were right about this thing, and I get kind of blown off, like, oh, it's kind of, we're used to it. It's Detroit. And that day, a pregnant woman got rear-ended in her car outside of at that intersection, and Neil Rubin, a longtime columnist of the Detroit News, went downstairs and decided to write a spot column about this. I mean, she was thankfully fine, but a lot of people saw it, and it just kind of said to me, okay, first of all, a stoplight outside of the 2 newspapers in town is sitting broken for a week and no one does anything about it. The next day, the emergency manager, Kevin Orr, read Neil Rubin's column, and he ordered the Public Works Department down there, and they fixed that light pretty quickly. And so I use that as a sort of example of just how broken Detroit was and how people accepted the brokenness. Whereas in most other cities in our state, if there was a traffic light out in Shepherd, I guarantee people would be having pitchforks in their hands at City Hall to get that traffic light fixed. They wouldn't let it go on for a week. But that had become just so standard in Detroit, and that was in downtown. Imagine what it's like in the neighborhoods where you're ways away from people who have influence. I mean, that's downtown at the intersection where the 2 newspapers and the Ask Me Union are headquartered on opposite sides of the street. And so it really has been that moment where I've just kind of tried to take that as an example of you just cannot accept poor services from your government, and you can't accept and sort of the defeatism. And I use that on a lot of things. There was a couple years ago, I'm rambling on here a little bit, but there was a couple years ago, I came across kept driving by an old party store that burned down in Detroit, and there was like a big pile of rubble. And I started asking about it, and finally, after I wrote about it, the city came and cleaned it up, but it took like a column in Crain's to get one site cleaned up, and that's just kind of how much of a struggle Detroiters go through, too.
Well, you certainly have had an opportunity now. I'd like to get an inside peek at what is happening. I know that, Chad, you have covered some major topics here over the last 7 months, including the pandemic, now the 2020 election, some racial injustice issues. I want to see, and will you come back and talk to me after the election? Can we kind of break that down a little bit and what that means? Because I've got some other things I want to talk to you about, but our 15 minutes went by really quickly.
Sure, I'd be happy to do it.
That would be great. I would really enjoy that. Let's get that on the books for sometime late November, early December. I want to thank my guest today, Chad Livengood, who's the senior editor of Crain's Detroit Business. I also want to thank my supporting sponsors, Marketing Resource Group, White Law, Dowding Industries, Governmental Consultant Services, AF Group, AT&T, and the Loomis Law Firm. You can listen to all of my podcasts at connectwithkb.com. Until we connect again, go live your best life. I'm your host, Kristin Beltzer.